what evil lurks in the hearts of men.
It wasn't high art, but it was highly rated.
The Shadow knows.
The Shadow. He was a good guy who looked and laughed like a bad guy.
I am here. Watch, I'll prove it to you.
And like other crime fighters of the day, few people knew who the Shadow really was.
Never seen, only heard.
Few people knew he was actually
Vermont Cranston, a man of wealth,
a millionaire scientist and criminologist. Every Sunday night for nearly 25 years, he'd cloud men's minds, foil dastardly plots, and rescue his beautiful assistant, Margot Lane, right before your very ears.
Hurry, Lamont, hurry.
No one has thought much about the Shadow since he faded in the 50s.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
But Anthony Tolan has. The Shadow is very important to him.
I collect the actual black slouch hat from the Pulp magazine covers, the actual cape that Brett Morrison wore at the radio broadcasts.
Don't take this the wrong way, please, but you've got all of this. Are you taking this a little too seriously? Tolan works for DC Comics, and he's been reflecting on the Shadow for most of his professional life.
You have this powerful image of Dracula, and you have it attached to the good guy, to the superhero who rescued the girl instead.
The Shadow's true identity is known only to his constant friend and aide, Margot Lane.
Margot begins to be captured 15 minutes into the show.
Every show.
Every show.
Was there ever a show where something terrible did not happen to her?
Not that I can remember.
Lamont, it's Margot. Where are you?
She was just a perfectly ordinary woman.
She was very prim and proper.
Well, quite proper, yes.
Right. Nobody knows Margot like she knows Margot.
But Lamont, it's terrible. People just disappearing into thin air without a trace.
This lady played the part at the height of the Shadow's popularity. Her name is Margot Stevenson.
My boyfriend, Clark Andrews, was the director of The Shadow.
Well, is it a coincidence that your name is Margot and your character's name was Margot?
No, I think...
That's quite an honor.
Yes, well, it didn't seem like anything at the time. It was a $25 job that was meant to get serious Broadway actors through sparse jobs, you know.
I do what I do to fight back the evil inside me.
And The Shadow will probably do pretty well by Alec Baldwin. He's the star of the new Shadow movie that reportedly cost $50 million to make. Hollywood is hoping to create a bright future from the distant past. Was there any sense that you were doing something historic? Something that would live with the ages?
No, I think...
Pass the test of time?
No, I don't think so.
Whether or not The Shadow made history, it sure made careers.
Even by the yellow light of your lantern, you cannot see me, because I have the power to cast a shadow across your mind.
It made the most famous Shadow, a 22-year-old named Orson Welles, a household name, and a very busy man.
At the time, he was doing about as much radio as he could squeeze in hour by hour. He had an ambulance, you know, would take him from one show to another so that he could get through traffic.
I believe there is a way the Shadow can get down there with your help.
I'll do anything. Anything, you know that, Lamont.
Margot?
The lines and the plots, week after week, sounded remarkably familiar, and the acting requirements were fairly simple. If you were the Shadow, you needed a menacing laugh. If you were Margot Lane, you needed a blood-curdling scream. Is it too much to ask?
What?
Can
Me
you
to scream now?
today, like you did then?
Yes, I guess I could.
Now, you're Margot Lane, and you've just been captured by the mad scientist in the castle.
No, I tell you what, I'm behind a closet door, and I'm trying to get the Shadow to hear me. And then of course, you have to, in those days, you have to draw back from the microphone a little bit. And
I'm at the edge of my chair.
Help! Help! Lamont! Lamont! That's not very good.
Well, I'd come running. I mean, if I were the Shadow.
I think Margot Stevenson had the best scream.
This man should know.
Tonight, perhaps, we may learn the answers.
For 14 years, Ken Roberts was the announcer for The Shadow.
Today's story, the creeper.
His famous voice beckoned audiences back to the same time, same channel.
Your Blue Coal dealer brings you the thrilling adventures of The Shadow, the program with a purpose. These weekly half-hour dramatizations are designed to forcibly demonstrate to old and young alike that crime does not pay, you fools.
And now, meet Inspector Donovan.
So why do you think people are still talking about The Shadow 60, 50 years later?
The Shadow had mystery. And, of course, the lines were just wonderful sounding combinations of words. The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The Shadow knows.
It's great melodrama. I don't want to see The Shadow become an archaic museum piece.
But my gosh, Tony, you're talking about this as if it's great art.
Jules Feiffer once said, to find the true timbre of a society, don't go to its great art, its great literature, its great music. That's not what the people listen to. Go to its junk.
And like junk food, sometimes it's the stuff that's kind of bad for us that we love the most. The Shadow was very much a product of its time, wasn't it?
It's the 90s, but we still have a number of evil things going on.
Well, I gotta tell you, Miss Stevenson, I haven't seen a mad scientist in years.
We've seen a lot of evil around, though, haven't we?
A lot of people think Orson Welles made that laugh famous, but it actually came from this 5'2" guy, actor Frank Reddick, who was an announcer on the show for 5 years.
Now, The Shadow's still on the radio today, isn't it?
It is. I think people will, always love this dark anti-hero stuff. Right now there are, I think, 115 stations, 1 million plus listeners, and The Shadow will reveal himself to moviegoers on July 1st.
For Arnold Schwarzenegger, there was Lamont Cranston. By day, he was a shifty businessman, but by night, he was a super sleuth called The Shadow. The Shadow is coming to the silver screen with Alec Baldwin in the bigger-than-life title role, and he gives us an exclusive behind-the-scenes preview.
Parker, and action.
Alec Baldwin is Lamont Cranston. By day, a businessman, but by night, the crime-fighting hero, The Shadow.
Oh no. What evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows.
The Shadow was a comic and radio hero of the 30s and 40s, now being made into a big-budget period movie. Baldwin is having a blast.
You read the script and it was funny. It was clever. There were people doing it and it was crazy. It was really original. And I said, I gotta be in this movie. I gotta just be in the movie.
Penelope Ann Miller is Baldwin's love interest, Margot Lane. Her scientist father is kidnapped by the evil villain Shiwan Khan, played by John Lone. It looks like a lot of hard work, but the cast keeps it fun.
See, Penny is a huge insurance risk on every film she makes because she's very thin-skinned. She's very thin-blooded. She's very fragile. She gets pneumonia, she gets sick because she's very delicate. She's very fragile. So at all times, we have to keep Penny warm.
It's so fun to come to the set every day and to feel like you can just play. And it's a fantasy movie, so everything's a little bit, over the top or not quite. I mean, we're playing it as believable as possible, but it's obviously a fantasy picture and it's an adventure.
Bet you wish you'd been a bit nicer to me now, don't ya? Bet you wish you'd listened to my ideas. Bet you didn't count on me being friends with a conqueror, did ya?
The supporting players include Sir Ian McKellen as Penelope's father and Tim Curry as a bad scientist who joins with villain Lone in the quest for world domination. Curry co-stars with a large bomb in many scenes.
It's an implosive bomb and extremely dangerous, and it's going to blow up the world so that Siwan Khan can rule as emperor.
Peter Boyle is one of the Shadow's henchmen, a cab-driving crime fighter.
I help him out, and I have a secret ring. I can pick up his signals. It's before their cellular phones, of course.
The thing that's most fun about it are the people. That everybody that we wanted to get for the film, that everybody that we really dreamed of having to play that part, like you said, this person has to play that part, this one. We got them all. We got them all. Including, can we Pam? Little Pam, the abominable snow girl.
It's a sexy outfit, isn't it?
So she's a sexy dame, isn't she? She won contests, hypnotized the entire city. They don't see it. How's that? They don't see it. The reason I liked it so much is that it was wild and it was imaginative. But like a lot of these movies I see sometimes, they're visually, they're very imaginative and they're technically really amazing. But they're just not, they don't have that snap to it, you know, that's kind of like Cole Porter-ish snap to it. Did I snap my fingers enough times for you to get that? The sound man is going, hey, hey, hey.
Miss Lane, what's going on here? Is that maniac a shadow behind this?
He's no maniac.
He's what?
A myth, Commissioner. Just a myth.
The Shadow will be on movie screens coast to coast next summer.
Speaking of movies, Claire, you know, it was a good weekend. I don't know if you got to see any movies this weekend, but you know, The Shadow just opened up to a tune of about $12.3 million this weekend.
That's a lot of money for a movie.
Yeah, well, some people could say that The Shadow's making a comeback, but don't say that to our super collector of today, because inside that house is a man who has collected over 1,000 pieces of Shadow memorabilia. So to him, The Shadow never left. It's not making a comeback. And we're going to go take a look at his collection a little bit later on today's show.
How interesting that he's made it a part of his everyday life. We're going to look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, he's got some really neat stuff. You don't want to miss this.
Okay, only The Shadow knows. And John has the pleasure of being a super collector of The Shadow memorabilia. You must be humming the song by now, John.
I tell you what, you said I'm in the pleasure, or it's a pleasure for me to be here.
Yes.
And indeed, it is very much a pleasure for me to be here, because as you know, The Shadow opened this past weekend, and a lot of people saw it. A lot of people maybe are being introduced to it for the first time, but that does not include today's super collector, Claire. He has seen The Shadow already 4 times. Can you believe that?
4 times and it just opened up. He's a real fan.
And it just opened up. And we are in his house here in Essex County to take a look at some incredible Shadow memorabilia. This is just one piece of over 1,000. You got to go. You got to finish going up these stairs and into this room. Come on, let's go meet
I was about to say I was seeing an interesting shadow over your shoulder, John.
Oh, I get it. A shadow. You ought to do this for a living. That's good. Now this is our super collector of the day, Anthony Tolan. Anthony, thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Now you have got an incredible collection. How did The Shadow hook you? What happened?
Well, I first started reading the Shadow paperback reprints when I was in junior high, and then started collecting the magazines. And then when I moved to New York, I was lucky enough to make the acquaintance of Walter Gibson, the creator of the Shadow, the man who wrote 283 Shadow novels. And we hit it off. And
speaking of the creator, now The Shadow for its day, I mean, that really launched all the other superheroes, didn't it? I mean, he was the one, right?
The Shadow was the first great multimedia phenomenon that jumped from radio to pulp magazines to movies all inside of a year's time.
Why? What was it?
Because The Shadow combined the traditional image of the villain from melodrama, the villain in the black slouch hat and cloak, or the Dracula image who tied the girl to the railroad tracks.
Speaking of which, the cloak. Claire, you got to see this. Take a look at this. Now, is this what I think it is? Is this the real McCoy here?
This is the actual cape that Brett Morrison wore at the Longacre Theater for the live radio broadcasts of The Shadow.
Do you mind?
Certainly.
All right, here we go. Put it on, John. Yes.
You got to tell me if I have good form here. Is that... How'd I do?
The Shadow shows were broadcast on the East Coast at 5 o'clock live.
The radio shows?
Right, which made Brett Morrison the 5 o'clock Shadow.
I get it. A super collector with a great sense of humor. Now this is something that he wore while he was on the radio to really kind of get him in the part, right?
Right, because they had a live studio audience.
Now, what about the hat you got there?
Okay, this is the actual black slouch hat that graced the covers of the original Shadow pulp magazines back in the 1930s and 1940s. The models would wear this hat when they posed for the magazine covers.
Hey, you look good in that hat there. You're looking.
It makes you laugh strangely.
Now, are you saying that the models themselves would pose for these pictures and they help make the covers?
Right. This hat was bought by the artist in 1932. It was already out of fashion then. He had a hard time finding it. But it appeared on over 200 covers of the Shadow magazine.
Well, speaking of 200 covers, you have a lot more stuff in the other room. Do you mind if we take a look?
Not at all.
Do you mind if I wear your cape, by the way? Is that
Not at all.
How do I look, Claire? Do I look all right?
You look great, John. I'm wondering if putting on the cape makes you feel different in any way.
It does. I can't do the laugh like he can, but it does. Look at all these now. I see all the other pictures you've got here. And these are valuable, are they not?
Oh, yes. The paintings are quite valuable, and these are the actual covers that grace the Shadow magazine.
Well, now, what about over here? Because I want to get an entire shot of this. Now, You've got, like, all the Shadow
I have a complete set of the pulps, a complete set of the comic books from the 40s, the current comic books.
Look at this. How many do you have?
Well, there were 325 magazines, 101 comic books.
Do you have a favorite of all time? Can we take a look at one?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Is that's this one here?
This one over here is the very first issue of the Shadow magazine. This particular copy was purchased off the newsstand in March of 1931 by the creator of the Shadow, and it's autographed by him.
Now, wait a minute. Why is he Asian here?
Well, actually, they didn't have time to contract for a new cover, so they took a reprint cover from a 1919 magazine and put it on because they could put a shadow on it. Then Walter Gibson, the creator of the Shadow, was told to rewrite the story so there would be an Asian character in it.
Man. Claire, can you believe that? A little history lesson here on the Shadow. Did you know that, Claire?
I did not know that at all, but you know what? I'm impressed. You've seen the movie 4 times. How many more times are you going to go back to see it?
Well, I don't know. The first time I was lucky enough to see it at the world premiere, sitting with Margot Stevenson, who portrayed the lovely Margot Lane opposite Orson Welles in 1938. So that made the movie.
Did you? Oh, well, obviously you saw it 4 times. You really loved it, huh?
I enjoyed it. Yes.
Yeah. Now, what's your rarest piece?
My rarest piece, probably after the cape and hat, is the actual transcription disc from the very first Orson Welles radio show. This was a studio copy, right? Here's a picture of Orson Welles playing the Shadow.
Wow, look at that, Claire.
He was 22 years old at the time.
22?
Mm-hmm.
And this recording that you have is his first time as the Shadow.
And it's the only known copy of it.
Wow. Can we hear it?
Sure. I run off a cassette of it.
All right. Just turn this on here.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have me to again. You can't do it.
That's him.
Let me out of here. Let me.
Oh, Gordon.
There he is.
Listen.
Wow.
I can't see anybody. Who's that?
I am the Shadow.
Ooh. Ooh, hey, listen.
We haven't much.
Anthony, that is great. You know, we could sit here and just listen to this all day. You know?
Well, I do at times.
Do you? Well, thanks so much for having us in today. And before we go, can I have you do that imitation one more time? Claire, I love this. Can you? Oh, wait. Yeah, you got to do the hat. And can we do the cape, too? Because you're so good at this. Okay.
Go for it.
It's all yours. I love this.
The Shadow knows.
Tony, thanks so much for having us in. You're the greatest. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Claire, there you go. A little Shadow history, a little Shadow appreciation.
Now I know a lot more about the Shadow. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit.
Every week, that slogan was heard by millions of listeners when The Shadow was one of the most popular shows on radio. But it wasn't just a radio success. The Shadow was a multimedia phenomenon who enjoyed popularity in virtually all forms of entertainment. The Shadow started out as a mysterious narrator of radio plays, but he really came into his own in a series of pulp magazine stories in the 1930s under the authorship of Walter B. Gibson. Shadow expert Anthony Tolan explains the beauty of Gibson's creation.
Gibson took the classic image of the melodrama villain and made that the good guy, instead of the figure in black who laughed, tying you down on the railroad track. He came and rescued the girl.
The Shadow was then reinvented for radio, where with the alter ego of Lamont Cranston and the help of girlfriend Margot Lane, he became a household word.
Lamont, where are you? Speak to me.
It's all right, Margot. I'm on my way to talk to Tenga as the Shadow.
The actor who played the Shadow for this 1937 rebirth was Orson Welles, already a stage sensation at the age of 22. His Margot for one summer season was actress Margot Stevenson, who learned of the serious actor's penchant for practical jokes just before they went on the air one day.
The clock's ticking up, you know, and just about to go on the air, he dropped the script all over the floor, and the director's frantic, running out of the control booth, picking up pages, and, you know, like, and the clock's ticking, and goes right on the dot. And he pulls another script out of his pocket and goes right on the air perfectly.
Other actors followed in Welles' footsteps, including John Archer and the man who played the part longer than anyone else, Brett Morrison. He recreated his best-known role for radio historian Frank Brzee in 1977.
Reader, Michael Reader, No, don't turn around. It won't do you any good. I am the Shadow, the voice of truth and justice.
The Shadow's success spread from novels to comic books and inspired collectibles ranging from pinback buttons to a series of blotters. The one arena where the Shadow failed was motion pictures, until 1940, when a Saturday matinee serial starring Victor Jory managed to capture the spirit of the popular stories. That Shadow serial is coming back to theaters this summer, while tapes of the original radio show keep it alive. And after all, it is radio that made the Shadow a permanent fixture in American popular culture. Leonard Maltin, Entertainment Tonight.
The Shadow knows.
Who knows what mysteries wait in the darkness? Who knows what adventure hides under cover of night? Who knows what power lies beneath the mind? Who knows what terrors prowl in the underworld?
I do what I do to fight the evil inside me. The part of it is still there, waiting.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
I know.
You can see Alec Baldwin, Penelope Ann Miller, and John Lone in The Shadow beginning July 1st.